members from various parties cutting across the spectrum who are going to participate in this call attention motion, giving to the world a picture of a united face of India to the aid of the suffering Tamils in Sri Lanka. Mr. Chairman, last year on the 14th March 2012, on the eve of the voting on the US-sponsored resolution on Sri Lanka in the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, the then Minister of External Affairs, Mr. S.M. Krishna, made a suo motu statement in Rajya Sabha. 1 year has passed. The External Affairs Minister has changed. Instead of Mr. S.M. Krishna, we have now Mr. Salman Khurshid. But nothing has changed in Sri Lanka. In fact, it has gone from bad to worse. Today's statement by Mr. Salman Khurshid has more or less repeated the rhetoric of the last year's statement by Mr. S.M. Krishna, with only updates in statistics, which will not convince anyone. On 14th March 2012, Mr. S.M. Krishna, and I have his statement here, he assured the House that the objectives of the UPA government continue to remain the achievement of a future for a Tamil community in Sri Lanka that is marked by equality, dignity, justice and self-respect. In each and every one of these objectives, equality, dignity, justice and self-respect, the UPA government has failed miserably to achieve any result. This is because the UPA government refuses to accept the root cause of the ethnic conflict and its blindfolded and misplaced trust on the Sri Lankan president. Unlike the Indian Constitution, which guarantees equality to all its citizens, the Sri Lankan Constitution positively discriminates against the minority Tamil population of the Sri Lanka. This is at the heart of the decades-old ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka. The LTTE was not the cause, but it is the consequence of the opposition, oppression and the repeated denial of justice for the Tamils by the successive governments in Sri Lanka. The root of brutal civil war lie in the complete disregard of political democracy by the Sinhala majority. This resulted in the decades of political violence, oppression and cultural genocide of Tamils. The Tamils' struggle for justice has come around a full circle with the violent and undemocratic oppressions of the non-violent protests during the period from 1948 to 1983 and the end of an armed struggle in May 2009. This had a heavy price of enormous sufferings of Tamils, forced migrations, killing of children, disappearances, deaths, war crimes and genocide. In the final phases of the Elam War in May 2009, more than 40,000 innocent civilians were killed in the last few days only. When the ADMK government, under the leadership of Dr. PuthiyathalaimuraiTV, assumed power in Tamil Nadu in May 2011, the very first resolution passed by the Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly was a unanimous resolution, including all political parties in Tamil Nadu, and urging the government of India to take the issue of war crimes to the United Nations and to declare those found guilty of these war crimes against Elam Tamils as war criminals and initiate action by working together with other nations for imposition of economic embargo on Sri Lanka. The UPA government did not even bother to respect the sentiments behind the Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly resolution. Yielding to the massive outcry and seething anger across Tamil Nadu about the genocide in Sri Lanka, the UPA government was forced to support the US-sponsored resolution against Sri Lanka in the UNHRC in Geneva in March 2012. Even then, India bailed out Sri Lanka by diluting the impact of the resolution by softening its tone and tenor and contents. The March 2012 resolution was about the findings and implementation of the Lessons Learned Reconciliation Commission, LLRC, yet the resolution remains far from being addressed. The Sri Lankan government continued to rain hell on the Tamils in Sri Lanka since May 2009. The sufferings of Tamil continue without any respite even after May 2009. with the Sri Lankan government enforcing cultural genocide in the north and east. On the one hand, with the growing presence of military and Sinhala settlements, and on the other hand, with destruction and dislocation of historical and archaeological traces of socio-cultural evidences of Tamil identity in that region. The Sri Lankan government has accelerated and enhanced its agenda of silent cultural genocide of Tamils in the name of development of the north and the east. The massive and rapid Sinhala settlements in the north and east of Sri Lanka, it also exposes the intention of the Sri Lankan government in altering the demographic configuration of the natural, traditional Tamil homeland through force and intimidation. The UN Commissioner, High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navanidam Pillai, has observed about the lack of progress of the Sri Lankan government and the failure of LLRC in addressing the issue of war crimes and political accountability. The UN Human Rights Council is meeting again next week in Geneva. The United States has submitted its first draft of the resolution promoting reconciliation and accountability in Sri Lanka. The draft resolution expresses concern at the continuing reports of violation of human rights in Sri Lanka, threats of judicial independence and law of the country, and failure of the government of Sri Lanka to fulfill its public commitments on devolution of political authority. We have fresh sets of evidences for these concerns, and I am authenticating all of them to this House. The first is the Human Rights Watch report on sexual violence against Tamils by the Sri Lankan security forces even today. Caption, "We will teach you a lesson." This is a 147-page document. The second is the CD cassette telecast by the Headlines Today channel yesterday night about the sexual violence by the Sri Lankan forces as narrated by the affected Tamil victims. The third is the CD cassette of the documentary No Fire Zone, The Killing Fields of Sri Lanka, documented by the Channel 4. And fourth, the heart-chilling photograph of the 12-year-old Balachandran, son of Prabhakaran, who was killed cold-blooded while the Sri Lankan army, in the Sri Lankan army custody. Calling Balachandran's killing a war crime, my party supremo, Dr. PuthiyathalaimuraiTV, termed it an inhuman act. And the boy was killed and executed in cold blood just because he was Prabhakaran's son. She likened these war crimes to the days of Nazi's Germany of Hitler. The minister's statement, when he spoke eloquently about the historically friendly relations with the neighboring country. Sri Lanka as a friendly country is a thing of the past. A country which carried a systematic genocide of my umbilical cord brethren Tamils, how can it be termed as a friendly country? As far as we, the Tamils, are concerned, Sri Lanka is an enemy country, and it will remain so as long as justice is meted out to the Tamils. And Elam Tamils have been pawns in the diplomatic game between the governments of India and the Sri Lanka for over the last 6 decades, with Indian political, military and strategic interests in the geopolitical context playing havoc with the Tamils in Sri Lanka. There is a general perception that the External Affairs Ministry is run not by the ministers but by the diplomats, whose mindset needs to be changed. It is time that the External Affairs Ministry repositions itself from the Lanka-centric foreign policy approach to the Tamils welfare-centric foreign policy approach. There is no environment to address accountability and dispense justice for these crimes committed domestically in Sri Lanka. A country which does not have an independent judiciary cannot investigate itself. During the United Nations Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva in March 2013, as demanded by my Chief Minister, PuthiyathalaimuraiTV, India should move a single-line resolution in the Council condemning the genocide of Tamils in Sri Lanka and demand an independent international investigation. And he urged the government to ask for an economic embargo on Sri Lanka. Finally, a word of caution for my friends from Tamil Nadu. Any amount of conferences in Delhi or Chennai or elsewhere, and meeting any amount of ambassadors of 40-50 countries will not wash the sins of the past. People of Tamil Nadu will not accept the sinners suddenly becoming saints. All that you have to do now is to force the UPA government to act, and act firmly against Sri Lanka. I hope the minister will address to my concerns and the questions raised.